The year 2020 was certainly an unforgettable one. And one day in particular stands out for me. It was November 7th, 2020. I am posting this video to my YouTube channel on November 6th, 2021, exactly 1 year after that fateful day. And what happened on November 7th, 2020 was a couple of things. Um, After many, many years of working on this labor of love, this documentary called Lady Wrestler about the courageous African American women who integrated pro wrestling in the 1950s. After years and years of working on the documentary and posting about it on social media and uploading YouTube videos about it, I was finally ready to announce that I was about to release the documentary first on a site called Gumroad. You can still go to Gumroad and rent Lady Wrestler, and you can also see it on Amazon. So this was going to be the big rollout of Lady Wrestler, and I was going to unveil the new movie poster, but something happened that week: the presidential election. Now, the presidential election of 2020, as we all remember, turned out to be the longest election in history. Because of the pandemic, a lot of the votes were mail-in ballots. So even though the election had happened Tuesday of that week, by Saturday, they were still counting votes in Pennsylvania, which was the state that was going to decide whether Joe Biden had enough electoral votes to win the presidency as he was projected to do. Now, in addition to being a filmmaker, I am also an author, and the leader of a writers group that I'm in had advised all of us who are in the group. He said, do not release anything the week of the election because it's going to be mayhem, it's going to be chaos. Do not schedule your release for the week of the election. Now, I disregarded his advice because I thought, well, I've already announced on social media that I'm going to make this big announcement on Saturday the 7th. And by then, surely the dust will have settled from the election. I had no way of knowing that votes were still going to be counted in the process of being counted, however many 5 days after the election. So I had scheduled my live broadcast on YouTube. I had also scheduled it to be a simulcast on my Facebook page, my Chris Bournet Facebook page, and my the Lady Wrestler Facebook page. And so it was going to be this big rollout. And literally right before I went on is when they announced the results of the election, that Joe Biden had just been declared the winner of the presidential election, that Pennsylvania had finished counting their ballots. And literally right before I went on is when this announcement came out, and people were out. I mean, it was like New Year's Eve and 4th of July rolled into one. People were literally out in the streets, honking their horns and, probably shooting off fireworks and literally dancing in the streets right before I went on to make this big announcement. So I should have listened to that leader of my writers group who said, do not under any circumstances release anything the week of the election. But, I once heard a funny comedian say, hindsight is not very valuable in the moment. So of course, looking back, what I should have done is taken the good advice of that friend of mine who leads that writers group and not released anything that week. Or what I could have done, once I realized that this big announcement about the presidential election had been made, I should have just went ahead with the live stream and said, hey, look, I was going to make a big announcement about Lady Wrestler and unveil the movie poster, but obviously something big has happened. The presidential election has just been called. So rather than take away from this moment, I'm just going to go ahead and reschedule my announcement for next week or whenever. If I had been thinking on my feet, I would have done that. But I was so caught up in, first of all, I was trying to master the technology to do the live stream. I had just subscribed to this website that helps you simulcast on YouTube and different social media platforms. So I was literally figuring out the technology right before I did the live stream. So I wasn't thinking clearly because I was so discombobulated trying to figure out how to work my computer and which button to press and which button to press to do the big reveal of a movie poster and share my screen and all that. So I wasn't thinking correctly, or clearly, I should say. And then also, right before I did my live stream, a friend of mine called and started going on and on and on about the election. And I didn't want to rush him off the phone and say, look, I understand you want to share this historic moment, and thank you for, calling me to share this historic moment, but I'm about to do a live stream, to announce this big project that I've been working on. This has been my life's work. Can you please get off the phone? Of course, I didn't do that. So I made it to the live stream when I said I was going to do the announcement. I think I had scheduled it for like 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. Eastern time. I forget exactly when, but I made it by the skin of my teeth. But one person showed up, one person to this big event I've been planning, this big rollout. One person showed up. And as soon as I unveiled the movie poster, that one person actually logged off, because you can see when you're doing a live stream, you can see how many people are participating. And one person showed up. And as soon as I unveiled the poster, they logged off. So it was just me talking to myself. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a flashback. I'm going to show you that video, which I had taken down from my YouTube channel. What I had actually done was taken the video down and reshot it with just the highlights. But I'm going to go ahead and do a flashback and show you this video that probably only one person has ever seen. That one person, God bless them. So it's just a learning experience. When you're creative, I don't have a crystal ball to see when something big is going to happen and disrupt some big event I've planned. So, it was a lesson. It was a learning experience. And Lady Wrestler, luckily, has gone on to reach, a lot of people who appreciate these women and their contributions to history. So without further ado, here's a flashback to 2020, that sorry live stream I did that only one person showed up to. So hopefully more than one person will get to see it this time. So thank you for watching. So hi, everyone. Welcome to the official release date announcement for the documentary Lady Wrestler, The Amazing Untold Story of African American Women in the Ring. Now, I am not going to be on here long because I know there's a lot of celebrating to do. We have a new president and a new vice president, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. So I'm not going to stay on here long. I know everybody wants to watch the news coverage and maybe get out there and celebrate yourself. So how's that for timing? But I did want to go ahead and announce the release of Lady Wrestler. So while I'm waiting for people to kind of get on and log on, first of all, I'm broadcasting from my home office here in Columbus, Ohio. And Columbus, Ohio, back in the 1950s and 60s, was the birthplace of women's wrestling as we know it. And the documentary, for those who may not be familiar, the documentary chronicles trailblazing African American women who broke boundaries in professional wrestling back in the 1950s and 60s. So they were sort of the Jackie Robinson of professional wrestling. I'm talking about women like Ethel Johnson, whom I interviewed in the documentary, her older sister Babs Wingo, her younger sister Marva Scott. Both Babs and Marva had passed away by the time that I began working on the documentary, so I didn't get a chance to interview them, but I did get to speak to Ethel. And Ethel passed away in September of 2018, but she was amazingly open and candid about her experiences in the wrestling industry. And I was so fortunate to be able to interview Ramona Isbell, another wrestling legend. And both Ethel and her sisters and Ramona are from Columbus, where I was born and raised. So I want to thank those women, thank those amazing women, Ethel and Ramona and their families, for opening their hearts and their lives to me and allowing me to document their experiences for history. And I want to thank their families for being so patient all these years. I've been working on this documentary on and off since 2006, believe it or not. So that's what, 14 years?
So first of all, I guess I'll, for those who may not be familiar, um, so once again, the documentary is about Black women who blazed trails in professional wrestling. And so, why has the release taken so long? Well, I first became aware of this story back in 2005. And I've told this story before, so excuse me if you're already familiar with it, or I've already heard it. But just for those who may not be familiar, so I'm professionally trained as a journalist. That's been my line of work for most of my adult life. So back in 2005, I was working full time at This Week News, and a friend of mine named Terry Anderson, an African American man who works in public relations, when I would call him for story ideas, he would tell me, "There's this really interesting lady who I grew up with. You should sit down and interview her sometime." That turned out to be Ethel Johnson. And I interviewed her toward the end of 2005. She had all these amazing stories about going all over the world, traveling to places like Canada, different parts of Canada and Latin America. She even had a stage name in Latin America, Rita Valdez. She went to Cuba before the embargo, before Americans were barred from going there. And she went to Japan, Australia. And come to find out, there were dozens of women like Ethel all over the nation, but based in Columbus because of a trainer, I'm sorry, a promoter named Billy Wolf, a wrestling promoter named Billy Wolf, who he married the first women's world wrestling champion named Mildred Burke. He kind of plucked her out of obscurity and groomed her to become a professional wrestler, and decided that Mildred needed competition. And although Billy was a white man, he was inspired by Jackie Robinson. So he decided that he would begin recruiting Black women into his wrestling organization. And the sisters, Babs Wingo, Ethel Johnson, and Marva Scott, were among the first women he recruited. And Babs happened to be friends with Ramona Isbell, who I mentioned earlier that I also interviewed, and kind of recruited her into the business. So I just thought it was a fascinating story. I wrote it up for the local newspaper, the Columbus Dispatch, and the Dispatch published the story in March of 2006. That happened to be a couple of different things: Women's History Month, and also the weekend that big fitness festival put on by Arnold Schwarzenegger, the movie star, former governor of California, and world famous bodybuilder. His people happened to see the article and called me at the newspaper and said, "Hey, this is an amazing story. These women are amazing. We didn't know these African American wrestlers from back in the 50s existed. We'd like to give Ethel Johnson a Lifetime Achievement Award." So I called Ethel's daughter, Shelly. And by the way, Shelly had been trying to get her mother's story kind of out in the public for years, and Terry was helping her. So I found that out later. So I called Shelly and said, "Hey, Arnold Schwarzenegger's people want to give your mother, Ethel, a Lifetime Achievement Award at the big finale of the Arnold Sports Festival." And being humble, being a retired grandmother, Ethel said, "Tell them I said thanks, but no thanks." So I just kind of felt like Ethel's story was so grand. And in my research doing the article, I found out there were dozens of women like her. I just thought, okay, this story cannot be limited to one newspaper article. I've always wanted to be a filmmaker. I'm not classically trained as a filmmaker, meaning I didn't go to film school. I actually went to Ohio State and have an English degree. But I just thought this would make an amazing documentary. So I asked Ethel if she'd agree to be interviewed on camera, and she said yes, to my surprise and elation, of course. So over the course of several different years, I sat down with Ethel and with Ramona and with their families, and with also other commentators like Jeff Lean, a Washington Post reporter who wrote a book about Mildred Burke, the first women's world wrestling champion, as I mentioned, who was Billy Wolf, the promoter's wife. They had a really stormy marriage and divorced in the 1960s. But Billy and Mildred were the ones who developed this, what's called sex, muscles, and diamonds formula, where they trained women wrestlers to be sexy, athletic, and to be glamorous when they were outside the ring. And even inside the ring, they wore these, really beautiful bathing suits that made them look like Hollywood pinup girls, basically. So after we started working on the documentary, a really good friend of mine that I went to high school with, Paul Paul Hill, who is a professional editor, let me know that the Wexner Center for the Arts, a really huge arts organization at The Ohio State University, had a program where they gave post-production assistance to filmmakers. And I was able to get a fellowship through that and finish up all the post-production, the editing. I recorded the narration because, as you can see, I have a Barry White kind of voice. So we finished the post-production at the Wexner Center, finished a cut actually in 2012, had a screening at a local historic African American theater for Ethel and Ramona and their families. And they said they loved it. And they were very patient over the years as I finished the edit and screened it at a few film festivals. So originally, my plan was to continue taking the documentary around to festivals and to have screenings around the world. But then COVID hit, and I realized, okay, it's time to go ahead and release that. So now we get to the nitty gritty of why you're here today for the official release date. So Lady Wrestler will be released on Tuesday, December 1st on the ladywrestlermovie.com website. So it will be available first for official download, for download, and that means you can buy it and you can keep it forever. And then, so what it will be is a phased release. So it will first be available on ladywrestlermovie.com for you to purchase as a download, and then it will be available on DVD, and I will soon be releasing information and announcing the DVD release, because I know a lot of people, if you're like me, you like to still have physical media that you can actually hold on to and hold in your hands. And so why this phase release? Why not just release the DVD and also make it available for rental on different platforms all at the same time? It mainly has to do with some technical issues that I won't get into right now. So also, why is this story important? So I believe this story is important because it documents a really important history, a really important chapter in history that's been forgotten. These women were really amazing trailblazers. They went into really dangerous situations, not just in the ring, but when they would travel down south to go to wrestling matches, they would often encounter people who would threaten to run them out of town if they went into integrated venues. They dealt with the Ku Klux Klan. They had to stay in segregated hotels. So I just think this is a really important chapter of history, and that's why I've worked all these years to bring it to the public. So now for the other part of the occasion today, that is revealing the new movie poster. And if you will hold on and indulge me for a second, I'm new to this live streaming, so I just want to pull it up here on my computer. Okay, so drum roll. Bear with me here, almost ready to reveal it. And there it is, the new Lady Wrestler movie poster. So I really like this design. I didn't design it. A graphic designer named Matt Foundry with a firm called Frost Foundry designed it. And I really love it because it has that retro 50s feel and kind of conveys the glamour of these women. On the, I guess would be your left, would be Ramona Isbell. In the center, I don't remember that woman's name, but she was also another famous wrestler of that era. And then Ethel Johnson, who was known as like the top Black star of her day for many years. So that is the new movie poster. And I want to say a big shout out to my friend, another filmmaker named Jacob Smith, who referred me to Matt Foundry. So the release again of Lady Wrestler will happen on December 1st at noon. For some reason, the service that I'm releasing the documentary through, I know a lot of times when releases happen, it happens right at midnight, but it will be at noon on December 1st. I don't see any questions here in the chat. But if you have any questions, feel free to email me at ladywrestlermovie@gmail.com. And again, I want to thank everyone for your patience. I know this has been a really long, exhausting week for all of us. So thank you again for your support. And I'll be planning lots of things in the future, a Lady Wrestler podcast, giving you kind of some behind the scenes, exclusive behind the scenes content. So I'll be announcing that soon. And again, thank you for tuning in, and I will see you soon.